that we have universities full of earth science people who are suffering waves of depression. There's a whole body of literature now about the mental health problems of climate scientists, and guess why? Because the rest of us aren't listening to them. Because they've been saying the future is written in stone, and we are frothing around with the wastefulness of our lives. So no wonder they're getting depressed. So it's about time that there was a strong global movement of the universities that employed those people becoming the hotbeds, the seedbeds, the demonstration centres for what we have to do. It's about time. I want it next year, not in 4 years' time. Please, so fantastic the work you're doing. Now, will you please go back and tell the Sorbonne? Really, they are messing around and not taking this issue seriously. Let alone the University of Lyon, where you're holding your cities events in a couple of months' time. They have not taken this seriously. Guys, get your act together. So I'm here to talk about money. Vast waves of money floating around the world. I'm interested in mobilising the $100 trillion debt capital market. There's a lot of money in that. We think there is a chance here. We've been building a coalition around institutional investors to support financing of green growth development in cities and other places. That's the headline. We know about the problem, as Deborah has so eloquently said. Actually, what she didn't say, what she perhaps didn't make clear to you, is that it's pretty damn horrific, the future we're looking at. It's not my words. The incoming Chief Executive Officer of the International Energy Agency, they run the world petroleum reserves, guys, says that we are on a road to catastrophe. We are tracking beautifully to a world to 6 to 7 degrees warming. Do you have any idea what this means? Well, I don't. So I asked John Schauenhuber, who's the German government's advisor on climate change, and he has a quote, which is the difference between 2 degrees warming and 4 degrees warming is civilization. Pretty damn crude, and that's actually a fairly senior climate scientist. So we are dicing with the future, not of the planet. It'll be fine, it'll get rid of us pests on the side. We're dicing with the future of our civilization, and more to the point, the lives of our kids and our grandchildren. I'm worried, and that's why there's a mental health problem amongst climate scientists. So let's take this incredibly seriously. Let's understand that we are talking about a rapid transition to a low-carbon and climate-resilient economy in double quick time, because we have left it so damn late. We have been rummaging around for the last 20 years, and emissions have continued to increase at this incredible pace. Now, I'm not saying it's British Columbia's fault, don't get me wrong. I can point fingers later if you like. But globally, we are all in this together, so we are all responsible, even if you live in a hydro haven like Vancouver. So we all have to work on it. That's the first thing. And of course, it's cities. 82% of emissions. That's us, guys. We live in cities. We're the ones that are the problem. 70% of people by 2050 live in big cities. But there is good news. The first good news is that my friend at the IEA, Fadi Birol, puts out a report each year called the World Energy Outlook, and he tells us what we can do. It's a fairly conservative estimate, but he says it's doable. It's about green infrastructure. Sure, a carbon price would be useful. Thank God British Columbia's got one. But I don't believe Harper's going to bring one in, and I don't believe Canada's going to get one. And I certainly don't believe it's going to be a substantial price in the US. It is a long play. Don't put all your eggs in this basket, which is what we've done for 20 years. As Jeffrey Sachs says, we have wasted 20 years on lawyers trying to work out an international scheme. It is the right thing to do in the long run. There are other options. The IEA talks about this as a green infrastructure revolution we need to have. Most of what we have to do is energy, is transport, is water, is buildings. Let's call buildings infrastructure for our purposes. It's cities. We know how to shift money in that sector. We've been doing it for 150 years. How do you think Vancouver was built? It wasn't built by free market forces. It was built by governments deciding what were policy priority infrastructure to help grow the city and develop it and deal with immediate problems like waste. That's infrastructure, and that's the sort of stuff we've got to do. We use government measures to shift capital to the right places. In British Columbia, there are regulatory requirements. There are leaseback guarantees. 2 British Columbia hospitals were built with a green bond last year, or being built at the moment. That is the way British Columbia builds infrastructure. There are different models in different countries. In the UK, we had to pull teeth to get a green investment bank funded with 3 billion sterling a few years ago. Last year, when there was an economic downturn, overnight, the Treasury of the UK found 50 billion sterling guarantee pool for housing developments. Why? Because it's an economic multiplier. They know how to, that's how they shift capital. So a real policy priority area was housing, not the environment. Now they did it really stupidly. And this is where we can now start learning from the last 150 years. They provided full guarantees for social housing bonds to build buildings, AAA bonds. I can't find an investor in the world that wants a AAA bond. The only ones that are buying them, negative interest in Germany, are the ones that have to for fiduciary duty reasons. They want A-. Now, what the UK government could have done, well, first they could have said, if you're going to build houses funded by this 50 billion, please make them green. That's not a big ask, is it? Like, we could do that pretty easily. They didn't. Two, they could actually say, put it in a pot, make it a partial guarantee pool, so you get a partial support if you're an investor, you take some risk, not all the risk, and they could have got 250 billion of houses built for a $50 billion contribution by the state. That's how we do it. That's the opportunity. Now I've got a whole toolkit of things like that. The other bit of the good news is that we have money in spades. We are awash in capital around the world, desperate for yield, who want that A- level yield, 2.5% to 4% returns. We can do it now. We can rebuild the world's infrastructure. We need to actually get serious on the risk bridging activities. That's rebiasing our existing support for infrastructure to be green. Every incentive in the world has to be rethought around green infrastructure, transport and so on. We need to make sure our tax system is supportive of green. What's the biggest tax credit scheme in the US? Oil and gas. 100 years after it was needed. We haven't switched it over yet. Okay, the US is an odd problem, I accept that. But you actually have some of these in Canada too. And every country, as the OECD tells us, still has fossil fuel subsidies. We need to ensure the financial viability of the assets we build. One of the models that has not taken off right well, as an example, is transport. Land value capture. Transport needs to be reconceived as property playing with mobility built in. That's what MTR, the Hong Kong Transport Authority, is doing in Shenzhen, building tower blocks on top of every house, every train station, and financing the capital expenditure through that. My institutional investor base, I have $34 trillion represented on my board, will buy those bonds then in those sort of circumstances. And finally, discovery. So the green bond market we've got is simply a discovery tool. Now, I've managed to wreck the thing. Here we go. So we have this market which is growing quickly globally. It's 37 billion going to 100 billion we think this year. This is a labelled market. This is about marketing the green projects and assets of cities. Cities like Ile-de-France, Paris, who have done a number of these bonds around social housing and energy and transport, or states like Massachusetts. The Treasurer of Massachusetts called the day they issued their first green bond the best bond issuing day of his life. In fact, the best day of his work life. Because he got so many calls from citizens saying, that is fantastic, you're doing this. And they are getting an enormous amount of buyers from ordinary citizens. So they've lowered the cost of their capital. It is cheaper. A green bond is cheaper in Massachusetts than an ordinary bond for exactly the same credit characteristics. That's, of course, the clue to how we do the other thing, lower the cost of capital. So our opportunities in here, I keep doing this, excuse me, the opportunities in here are in a variety of areas. This PowerPoint will be available for you afterwards. It's in corporate bonds, it's in sovereign bonds, it's in municipal bonds, which is the fastest growing segment of this market. It involves all sorts of assets, not just energy, transport, water, and so on. That's the appetite we're getting around the world. It is fast growing. We have at the moment, as I said, $43 trillion, well 34 on my board, but $43 trillion of investors who came out of the UN Climate Summit and said, climate change is the biggest thing we have to do globally, governments have to act, and by the way, if you create some investments we can invest in, we will invest. They went that extra step. And the insurance industry, representing $30 trillion, went one step further. They promised to multiply by 10 their climate investments by 2020. And what they're saying to me now, where are these cities with these deals? We can't find green bonds or climate bonds. Please come to us. That's the challenge. We're launching this program for cities around green city bonds with a bunch of coalition partners you can see at the moment. It's a marketing campaign for city green infrastructure. It has the goal of lowering the cost of capital selectively for green for a variety of measures. It's not just rich countries, it's also poor. Johannesburg, Beijing, those cities. We are looking for support from development finance initiatives. We have them. World Bank, IFC, who will provide partial credit enhancement for green bonds if people meet the criteria. That's how we lower the cost of capital for green selectively over the brown. And we're setting up peer-to-peer support mechanisms. The Treasurer of Gothenburg, for example, has been mentoring the Treasurer of Portland to bring their green bond to market. That's one of the things we're doing under the campaign. We hope you will join us because the opportunity is there. Capital is cheaper than it has been in generations. There is an enormous amount of capital desperate for yield. We can do this, and we can do it quickly through cities.